What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Sweeney Boo. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited that we get to connect and have this conversation. We got to meet in person up at Fan Expo Cleveland, and you signed my wonderful Harley Quinn cover that you've done. Like, I love it so much. And if you're not familiar with Sweeney's work, artist on Harley Quinn, currently working on Cruella de Vil. You have your books of, Over My Dead Body. You have so much good stuff that's out there, and I love it. So I want to talk all things comics, but I gotta know first, did you always love comics? Like, is that something you grew up liking, or did it kind of come in later?
Well, first of all, thank you.
Yeah.
That's very kind. I really appreciate it. I grew up reading French comics because I grew up in France. So like like comic strips, you have like Asterix and Obelix and that kind of stuff. So that was what I was the most familiar with as a kid.
Okay.
And then as a teen, I grew up into reading more like I guess adult bande dessinée kind of stuff. And I discovered, I think I was 16, like a French version of like I think it was like the origin of Spider-Man. And I was like, this is incredible. And moved to a bigger city that actually had comic shops and discovered the pleasure of getting, your own little like box with your own comics every
Yes.
month, which is like, and like, yeah, so I feel like I'm not part of the people who like grew up with it. But even though I enjoyed it in my late teens, it's like it's the best thing.
Oh,
It's so
it's
great.
and you're one of us anyways. It doesn't matter whether you get it at a young age or an early age. And half the time, those of us that started young, we got out for a while. So comics are great because they're for everyone. So it works out well, no matter where you discover them. Where was it then for you of saying, okay, being introduced to the medium of comics and liking comics now to say, okay, I want to start to create. Have you always had a love for creating? Because if people don't know you, you write and draw, like, so like you are super talented, like, and that standpoint, like, where was it though that you wanted to work your craft into comics though?
I don't know if I ever had like a specific idea of what I wanted to do. I don't want to be like, oh, I went with the flow. Like I had I don't know if you're familiar with Sky Doll, which is like it's a comic book. It's Italian and it's
Okay.
basically it's gorgeous. It looks like a Disney movie. It's purple and pink and colorful, and the character designs are incredible. But it's about sci-fi and sex dolls and religion. And I was just like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. So having this like contrast of
Yeah.
like just stories and um that's definitely the book that I was like, this is exactly this is gonna be my future.
Yeah.
Um, when it is about more like about the writing, it's just I always had ideas, but it's always like kind of hard to just like get to like do them. It was always like easier for me to like draw them first. So I've started writing like only in the past like 3 years, but it's like it's as satisfying as getting to play with your childhood like characters, so like Harley Quinn and all of that. It's like I'm getting to play with my toys,
Yeah.
but getting to create your own little world, it's a nice little challenge.
Yeah. Well, I bet for sure. And yeah, like you right now, you work with Harley, it's a lot of us grew up, reading or watching on the animated show and seeing Harley's character blow up, or if you're a Disney fan, everyone knows Cruella de Vil. Like, so like you just are getting to
Exactly.
play with so many of the toys of your childhood, but at the same time you're doing also a lot of opportunities where you're creating, your own original comics and things like that and telling stories that way. So for you, how do you kind of come about figuring out what project like you want to do, whether it's a writing project or an art project or both?
I feel like when it's on an IP, so like Cruella or Harley Quinn, I'm touching wood. I've been lucky enough that I've been approached to do those. It doesn't mean that I haven't, like, I didn't have ideas in the first
Yeah.
place, but I always have a little book with like ideas and everything. And of course, there's like characters that I would love to like write or draw one day. But in terms of like my own stuff, it's, I don't know, it's sometimes, you think about a character or a story and like it gets like a little fire up in my stomach and I'm like, oh, it's just like this is like I like this. Or I remember my very first one, even though it's like it's kind of like based on my own story, In and of Yourself, I just remember sketching Mindy and I was just like, I knew her story, I knew her name. Like she just came to me right away. Now I kind of take the stories in terms of like, for example, with my recent one, Over My Dead Body, which is just like it's an academy of witches. It's a little mystery, but I also wanted to make sure that I created like a magical world that was like, welcome to everyone, and getting to do stuff just for, yeah, for everyone.
Yeah.
And I have other projects coming up. It's always in terms of like challenging myself and having like some sort of message.
So you said you kind of the writing came later on in your, comics journey where you started kind of working with art first. Where was it for you? Like, did you always have a passion for art? Like, did that start at a younger age, or where did you kind of discover that you were talented in the art field?
I think I've always been creative. Um, like I was one of those kids that like, we all draw when we're kids, kind
Yeah.
of. Some do it a little bit more than others. But I guess it's like when I went to high school, I really liked it, and it was kind of like the only thing that I was good at. It was the only way I could really express myself. And then I decided to go to like it was like a more art high school, and I was like, this is it. This is it. Like I feel like home. I feel like I'm understood and I can like play with like stuff. So it was just, I guess at first it wasn't really a passion for drawing. It was just like I found my way of expressing myself, and I kind of like just like I'm very I have a tunnel
Yep.
vision. So like if I do one thing, I do it.
That's so cool to hear because you say like earlier we were talking, you mentioned how there was a book that just it was beautiful, it was like this is what I want to do in comics. What part of your where was you on your journey then where you started to create comics and kind of start to get stuff out there, and how did that journey happen?
Um, so, at the beginning when you're kind of on your own, you're navigating the world, like the
Mhm.
comic world, but like I was still in France, so it was kind of like, how does it work over there? And so you tend to usually, I paired up with a writer, he approached me, and then we started developing a story together. I mean, you learn by doing it with my very first um, project, which ended up being In Love Yourself. It's just that I told him about this idea that I had, and we started writing it together. Uh, Long story short, it kind of fell apart between us, so I ended up finishing the project alone. But I'm very thankful to the fact that I had someone who had been in an industry who gave me some sort of like I had an idea of how it worked, even though it's different now. Or but it gives you like a baseline of like I can do better, or like I like I learned
Yeah.
basically. But it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
I put myself out there on the internet and everything, and just started communicating with people. I remember finishing high school, and I was like, I'm gonna start a webcomic because it was like very big at the time, and people on DeviantArt had their own like strips. But like getting to write a story, I had the beginning, I had the end, and I was just like, I have no idea what's happening in between. So getting to like, yeah, be with a writer, and writing is another craft
Yeah.
entirely, and I'm still very much learning. So it's definitely very interesting.
has has working as a comic book artist, has that helped you though start to hone your craft the more you create comics with other writers and stuff, to learn writing to kind of improve and grow in that case?
I mean, yeah, and I've also discovered the difference between writing for myself
Mhm.
and for Cruella. I got to write for Mariana, which is like I had never written for someone before. So the advantage that I had when I write for myself is that I kind of always have an idea of what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
I pretty much do the storyboards at the same time. It's very easy. It's way more loose maybe to like just like move stuff around. Um, but getting to write for someone else has been like, it's very interesting to have like, I have my idea of what I'm writing in my head. I'm still giving, I hope that I gave like as much detail as I could, but not too much. So
Right.
like she could still play around because I know that like as a creator, I love to be able to play around. And I like you receive pages and it's like just seeing how someone took what you told but like saw it in totally different kind of way, but it works so well and you're like, it's just teaches you everyone's brain like works differently. And it's I'm like, oh my God, this is what writers do all the time. It's like Christmas, like you get your little gift and you read your little pages and it's pretty cool.
It's a cool moment when you have those.
Yeah.
I hear that often. So one of the main exposures that I got with you was I was very familiar with you done a lot of covers and things like that, but I kind of got my first exposure to you of when you were on the Harley Quinn book. So how did that kind of project come about for you?
So during the pandemic, I got Facebook DM and I was like, this is a scam. This is not real. And it was an editor at DC who was like, I love your work. Do you want to start doing some stuff for us? So, I like kind of just started in there slowly. I did like some short stories and started doing more covers. What's great within DC, it's like when you start working with a team, then you meet everyone else. It's like people start messaging you, so it's very much a family. And so I got to play around with other titles, and yeah, the team behind Harley was just like, I got an email. I think it was like September, most of September, and they were like, you wanna draw Harley, and it's one of those days like. I don't have time, but I'm gonna make time because you can't say no.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure it is a process then, drawing an entire comic book monthly, and that I'm sure that's quite an ordeal, but it's one like you said, you couldn't say no because it was a Harley book.
Right, it's like I guess plus it's like it's one of these characters that comes with so much not baggage in a negative way, but it has
Yeah.
such a big fandom and just like people are very attached to her. And the team before Teeny and I, like I knew being with Teeny, I wasn't worried about the story was gonna be like, but I'm like we're like I'm following in like such a crazy steps. Like what they had established before us was already like incredible. So, just at some point you just get into your drawing and it's like every month. So at some point I was just focused on like getting it done and like what I think is good, what we all think is good within the team. And it's been honestly so much fun. It's been like 2 years. We're getting at the end now of our arc. It's ending with issue 43 next month. But like getting to spend 2 years drawing Harley Quinn is, I get to say that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's got to be. And like you said, the team before with Riley and
Yeah.
Stephanie, what they did was so good. How do you approach a book like that? Like especially like your art style is completely different than Riley's when it comes to creating. And it both are beautiful in their own ways. Like, so how do you bring your style to a book while still paying tribute to what's happened before?
Um, I feel like if, the collected version is going to come out. So I think if you look at the first couple issues, you can still see I was like searching where to go, where to land. I feel like I was definitely heavily inspired by what they were doing before us, just in terms
Mm.
of layout, the dynamic. I feel like it was like so important to the character. And then at some point I just like kind of let go and it just became like Harley. I know there's a lot of people who come up to me talking to me about her teeth because I don't know throughout the issues, like I guess Harley's teeth have grown like bigger and bigger. And I didn't really do it on purpose, but I felt like at some point it just added to the character. She just like I kind of made her my own at some point.
Yeah.
I like we understood each other and yeah, it's like it came naturally, but it's definitely true that like right away when you start a title, you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just hoping it's gonna be okay.
Well, in my opinion, it has been more than okay. So
Thank you.
hats off to you. Does when you work on something like Cruella or Harley, you have constraints because of
Mhm.
stories that have been told or how they're supposed to look to a degree. Do you find like do you find those constraints freeing, or are they tougher than like when you're writing something original, where you can kind of just do whatever you want, but like I feel like you have to try and do a little differently with Corella or Harley.
I love constraints because okay, I
Yeah,
love being given a box and just being able to like break it. This is because like I know what I can't do or what I can do, and I'm just like playing around with it, and that's where I get really creative. If I'm given like an entire like you do whatever you want, I'm just like I'm kind of like it's too much. It's too
okay.
many options. So I've never really had that I guess like I know that when I write my own stories, like I could really like get into like, oh my God, and the world and like, like going bigger and bigger because it's like it's definitely an open world kind of thing. It's like I can
Yeah,
create whatever, but I limit myself in terms of like it's contained. If it speaks to me, I'll because otherwise it gets too overwhelming. Um, but with Cruella, what was funny is that because usually I don't like I not usually I don't care. I worked in video games for a while, so like I work on IPs. It's fine. Feedback is fine. Stuff that
yeah.
you can't do is fine. Sometimes it's very funny. But for Cruella, the only thing that I had was like she cannot smoke, and I was just like, damn it. It's like she's such like, Cruella, she's like she is surrounded by her heavy green cloud of smoke. It's just always a bummer. Like it's just that's
That's
it.
I didn't even realize that in the midst of reading that wasn't the case. Because even in like I'm looking now at the cover of issue one, I I think my mind made it look like it was a cigarette in her hand because
Yeah,
I'm so
yeah.
used to it.
And no, cannot anymore.
Wow, that's crazy. So where so we talked a lot about you working in IP. One of the things what I love about doing these interviews when I bring a creator on, because I'm always familiar with some of your work if I reach out to you because I want to talk. But then I always get to discover new things. And for me, in prepping to talk to you, I got to discover Over My Dead Body, which was a delight to read.
You.
So if people haven't gotten to experience that, what was kind of the background for that story?
Um, I've always loved witches. It's like the generation who grew up with Sabrina the Teenage Witch and well, Harry Potter. And I don't know, dark academia and this idea of like witches academy has always been like something that was like that I wanted to do. Um, Over My Dead Body, I didn't want it to be like I didn't want to create like a crazy witches world. I wanted it to be pretty. It's a whatever. It's a school of magic.
Yeah.
It's pretty self-contained. But I just wanted it to be a little bit scarier. And sometimes people ask me like, can you like just sell it to us in like very short lines? And I was just like, it's Harry Potter, but there's actually diversity
Mm.
and 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 yeah,
Yeah.
so
Well,
there you
and
go.
it's true. There is the diversity of it, which I think it expands on the story so much more. Do you when you're doing a project like this, are you are you harder on yourself as an artist then? Like or as a writer, would you go like, why did I make myself have to draw this page?
It's like it's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
I love working in comics. I spend hours working in comics, and oftentimes I'm like, why do I do this to myself? But it's a privilege to tell myself that, to like blame myself for having too much work. So like can't really complain about
Right.
it. But it's one of those things that when it's like such big books that, when you write it, when you draw it, yeah, you tend to have to like review it a lot and a lot. And you oftentimes spend more than like a couple years on them. And man, when you see those like first pages, you're like, can I like redraw it all? please. But you can't. You gotta let
Yeah.
go. So
So if people follow you online, they'll see that you posted that you're working in that world again. Is was that something that you originally had started out thinking like, oh, I'm gonna, or what, when you originally created this book Over My Dead Body, like that was it, and then and or did you always have ideas for more in the future?
I always had ideas for more. When we sold it as like a 2 volume story.
Okay.
But I never wanted to be too, closed up in terms of like I wanted to leave a lot of like just open doors in terms of like what the world is. We have the fledglings and we have everything. There's a lot of like stuff that we don't know about how the magic works and why there's a lot of like people with like no parents and they don't know where they come from. So the second book does answer a lot of those questions, but I feel like even this one, I don't know if we're gonna do more in the future, but
Yeah.
it's not gonna close like all the doors in terms of like if we want to keep exploring one day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is is it hard for you or easy? Because I feel like, drawing for Over My Dead Body is a little different than having to draw for Harley Quinn and what each project asks for. Is it easy to switch modes with your art of like, all right, now I got to get into Harley mode, or I got to get into Over My Dead? Like, is that hard or easy to do?
I have to admit it might be like a little hard. It just might take me a little bit of like transition. I do right now I'm working on both at the same time, so I kind of got into like a groove, but I remember that at the beginning, Harley's pages are like very dynamic. And Over My Dead Body, they're dynamic, but in another way, it's very like contemplative. It's a lot of like backgrounds. So I have to like time my schedule in terms of like what my brain can take, in terms of like what I can manage and do. And like it's interesting.
Yeah. I just have it in my mind, like, especially if you're working on something at the same time, you at one point you're just like, wait, why is Harley in this book all of a sudden? Like this, I accidentally drew it.
I think I don't know if I've never really discussed that with other artists, but I have a very mechanical way of doing my pages. I don't do like one page at a time. For example, I draw all of my backgrounds, no characters. And then I do all my characters, but one by one. So I do like batches of pages where I'm like 10 pages and I'm drawing all the same character for the 10 pages. So it becomes this very like mechanical way of
Yeah.
drawing that I don't know, it works for me, but it just like I turn into a sort of a brainless machine.
And that's for whether it's an IP or original, it's the same
Yeah.
kind of process for you. So if I'm understanding right, like so when you were working on Harley, you did all the backgrounds and then like it might have been Harley was the first character that you then put in and then you
Yeah,
put other.
exactly.
That's fascinating. I've
It
never heard.
just I guess it's the like, it feels like I'm doing more when because like I don't finish one page at a time. I finish like maybe five at a time because I'm like doing all of them in like bits by bits.
Yeah.
So it feels like I'm just like climbing the ladder a little faster. I'm sure I'm not, but I'm just tricking my brain that way. And it works.
That's so great. Like I just I'm processing in my mind now. I'm like you could see like they were like, why is there just a whole issue of just Harley by herself because you didn't have time to get to the others? You're like, oh no, we're sending it to print.
It's like that one for Garfield, but we could make the entire book of Harley. It's just her. It's just her. Actually it's just been her the entire time. No one else was there.
That's that is fascinating. I almost I'd love to see like the process of that someday of just like like seeing those panels like just an entire like book 5 pages of Harley and no one else, no other characters and stuff on it. That's
This is
so
actually a
cool.
pretty cool idea and very good with her. It's like pretty on point.
Yeah. Well, that's what I love too about doing these interviews is you get to kind of see behind the scenes. I've had tons of artists on here before and I've never heard that. And so like that's a beautiful thing about comics and the medium is, right? Like what works for someone might not work for someone else and how you create is going to look differently than someone else creates. And I think that's a beautiful thing about art.
Every time that there's like a like documentary about like comics or just like even animators, just some people just we all have the same kind of like mediums and just
Mhm.
like softwares, but we all use it differently. Everyone has a different like way to do anything. And it's the same with writing, which is it's yeah, it's pretty I comics is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's so good. Well, Sweet, I want to respect your time. But I want before I let you go, I wanted to ask, we've talked about Harley, we've talked about Over My Dead Body. Is there anything else that like you've worked on or that you got coming up that you wanted to kind of mention or share if people don't know your stuff?
Well, I just the next issue of Harley, issue 43, is Teeny and I's farewell. So pick that up because we're saying goodbye, and I hope, we're gonna try to pour everything out into this issue, and I hope it's like a good way to say goodbye. But I can't say other more than that, but like there's a project that I'm working on. It's gonna be me again, just on my own in my head,
Yeah,
and it's probably gonna be like a comic series, and it's gonna be different.
cool.
So yeah, I,
Yeah.
I'm
Is
excited
that
for it.
is that kind of a bittersweet moment when you're wrapping up something like Harley, where you're putting, like you said, it's been 2 years of your life, and I'm sure there's probably a little bit of like, okay, I can now explore other things, and right. But is it hard to close that chapter sometimes as
I
a
mean,
creator?
yeah, I mean, yes and no. When I got the
Yeah.
email for Harley, I think the fact that I have a lot of anxiety. So I'm always ready for the bad stuff to happen. So when it happens, you're like, all right. I
Okay.
mean, it was a good ride,
Yeah.
It's I think I took it that way. I was just like, it's just the way it's supposed to be. There's no point of fighting it.
Yeah.
The new team for Harley is going to be absolutely incredible. And the point of these characters is for everyone to quote unquote get to play around with them.
Right.
So yeah, I'm with this next book, I'm just ready to like challenge myself and maybe what people expect of me a little. So
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. So, well, where can people follow along with you, stay up to date with what you're working on, what you're creating, so that way when you can talk about things that people can get to know and make sure they're picking it up?
So I'm trying to lay off social media a little bit, but otherwise I'm still like I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Sweeney Boo. But I have a Substack where I've started. I'm gonna publish like a newsletter every month, and so people can actually follow what I'm up to, and I share sneak peeks, the events that I'm gonna be at, and also other stuff that I'm watching and reading. So yeah.
Which y'all sign up to the newsletter because I was checking it out today and I read it this morning. Um, y'all, your movie jar thing is fantastic, by the way, and
Isn't it?
I'm
It's
implementing that into my house. I love it.
I love it. Everyone, okay, we don't go out very often, but like we ended up at a few parties this summer and we mentioned the movie genre and everyone's like, "Oh my God, we're gonna try it with our family." We just did it last night again. We like pick a few movies every week and it's a blast. It's so
Yeah.
cool.
It's I because like I'm reading the newsletter, I'm like, this is exactly what we do. We spend 20 minutes on Netflix or whatever trying to define what movie. And then at that point, we're like, oh, do we even have time to watch a whole movie now? Like, let's just put
Right?
on a show. So
And
if you have, I'm telling you,
that's all we do. It's
it's
awful.
it's it's a brilliant idea. And I don't even want to go fully into the idea because you have to go sign up for the newsletter so you know what we're talking about.
Exactly, exactly. And if you like the newsletter, I might even start including kitty pictures and just what just crazy stuff. Just the
Fantastic.
crazy stuff.
So, well, Sweeney, thank you so much just for taking some time to talk about comics and the process with
Oh,
me.
thank you.
It's been an absolute delight. So,
I'm so sorry. I don't want to like ask anything about you. I just want to say I'm like impressed by your bookshelf and your collection behind you.
thank
It's
you. It's been a long process. But I kind of got back into comics through COVID. And and this is yeah, this
this
is
is
what we got now.
this is pretty. This is
It's
a
a lot of
pretty
reading.
pretty collection.
Thank you. Well, gang, make sure you follow all the links that we talked about. And so you can follow along with Sweeney. Go get that final issue of Harley. Sign up for the newsletter so you know all the things. But I will have all the links in the description of this video, or if you're listening on podcast and the links there as well. But with that being said, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.